here to sugarcoat life's already above you. Too much shelter causes pain, let's just be real honest. Things are gonna knock you down, avoidance will not help you out. Let's talk it through, you, me, and you. Let's keep it real honest.
Hello and welcome to Real Honest, the podcast where I share candid thoughts and feelings about life, love, and relationships, God and church, adulting, the workplace, and everything in between. I'm your host, Samantha Labat, and you may not always like me, but I will always be honest with you. Looks like we're back to regular scheduled programming of releasing new episodes every Wednesday at 6 a.m. Central, so fingers crossed that I can keep that up for the rest of the summer, and then when school starts again, we'll see where we go from there. Quick goals check-in. So I think for the last, I don't know how many check-ins, I've really only been mentioning my book, but I was going back through my planner to see, I know I set some other goals at the beginning of the year. Maybe I accomplished something. And I did. One of my goals was to get a B- or higher in both of my courses my first semester at seminary, and my final grades are in. I did get an A in both of my classes, so that's very exciting. I feel really good about that. I'm very happy to not be taking classes this summer, but I am excited to go back for the fall semester, which for those who don't know or haven't listened or whatever, I have no desire to be a pastor or work at a church. I am going to seminary purely because I want to know what's in the Bible. I'm going to deepen my biblical knowledge. I'm going to meet people because I work from home, so it's something to do in person where I'm around people on a regular basis. To have some conversations and learn what is being taught the Bible says. Those are just things that I'm interested in. I don't even know if I'm going to complete the master's degree. I'm taking it one semester at a time, 2 classes at a time, and I might decide I got what I needed after this fall semester. I might do 2 years, 3 years, who knows? Well, God knows, but I don't know and you don't know. And so I at least have confirmed that I have enrolled for the fall, and I'm not thinking too far into the future with this, and it's working really well. It's been a good experience so far. I've been enjoying it. I also had a goal of getting out of debt this year, and that's not happening. So got to set a new goals there. And I also had a goal of writing 12 chapters of my book this year, which is still possible. It's just I wanted to write one a month, and I have not been consistent with that, so I would have to double up some months, which is totally possible. We'll see. I am making good progress with the book. The main change that I have made this year is not going back and reading what I've already written at the start of my new writing session. I just write something new. Which, depending on how much time has passed between this writing session and the last session, sometimes I have to go back and at least to the previous page to be where did I leave off? What was I planning to do next? So what I try to do is at the end of every writing session, I write a little outline of the next scene, just so that I can work off of that and not have to go back. Because if I go back and read stuff, I just will always edit it. I have heard a lot of people in the NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, for those who don't know, but people in the NaNoWriMo community, I've seen a lot of people say, don't edit as you go. It's a first draft. The first draft is not supposed to be edited, which I understand the intent behind that advice, but just for me personally, I can't not edit as I go. When I can't just word dump. I write a sentence, and while I'm writing the sentence, I speak it out loud, I read it in my head, and I rework the sentence until I'm okay with it, and then I move on to the next one. This is kind of something that I do all at once, though. It happens very quickly. It's not 10 minutes of sitting there and rewriting the same sentence over and over again. It's 2 minutes of thinking and then writing the sentence. And I a lot of times I'll ruminate on the scene for an hour while I'm working out or doing something else. I'll be cooking, walking around my house, and I'll be thinking about it. So I'll have the scene ready to go, and then all I have to do is sit down and write it. But I am a perfectionist, and I'm also really good at spelling and grammar. So I typically it comes out edited already. But in terms of editing what's already there, usually I will get new ideas. Sometimes in between my writing sessions, I'll talk to somebody or watch a TV show or listen to a song, and I'll get a new idea or there's a way that a scene was playing out that is not quite working and I'll want to go back and rework that. That kind of stuff is supposed to be for like when your draft is finished, then you go back and edit. And I have previously been in a habit of every time, like when I wrote my first book, every time I would sit down to write, I would start at the beginning and I would edit everything that I had written so far and then write my new chapter. And that's why that one took years and years and years to do. So I am making progress, even though it's slow, but I'm very happy with it. And I'm trying to decide if I want to stick with the goal of getting the 12 chapters done this year and getting those sent out to my friends that are giving feedback, or if I want to pause and try to outline the entire series, because there might be things that I want to happen later in the series that I need to plan for up front so that I can set them up in other books, in which case it would make more sense to outline it. But I might also just do it as like a continuation, because it's a book about secret agents in training at spy school, and they're at the school for 5 years. So the idea is that it will be 5 books because it's 1 per year at school. But I might want every book to stand on its own in a way that like I just write a complete story and then I'm like, all right, now what do I want to happen in year 2? And then it doesn't have to be all totally planned out from the beginning. But I will figure that out and get back to you guys on the next update next week. But I still want to hear what you guys are working on. Like when you set your goals at the beginning of the year, or even do you do that? Do you set goals for the whole year, or do you do it like quarterly? Do you do it like 6 months at a time? And when and how do you check in on what you set out to accomplish this year, in this season, whatever it is? And then do you totally change your mind, or do you absolutely stick with the same ones the whole year? Like, how does that work for you? In terms of what God is teaching me right now, I am still in the book of Job in my Bible study. This is also going very slowly. I'm using the Bible recap, which is a chronological reading plan, and it's to be done in a year if you do the reading every day, but I don't do the reading every day. Sometimes I do 2 or 3 readings in a day. Sometimes I do one reading in a week. It just kind of depends on what I have going on and how much time I have. So I am very, very slowly going through the book of Job. But I had mentioned last week that instead of reading this as like a story of a man who never loses his faith despite all the terrible things that happen to him, this time around what I'm getting from the story is more like the advice that Job gets from his friends while he's suffering, and kind of evaluating, are they even actually trying to help him and they're just doing it badly? Or are they malicious? Are they not trying to help him? Do they not even realize that they're not doing this well? And it's interesting because it's just on the whole kind of theme of friendship that the podcast has been on lately, and that my life has been on lately. Just that I spend a lot of time like thinking and evaluating how I want to spend my time and who I want to spend my time with. And I'm just really in a season of noticing changes quicker, I think. Like, I think I'm noticing more up front. Like, this is not really what I want it to be anymore, or I'm not getting what I once got from this. I feel like in the past, it would be years and years and years before I would be like, you know, I've consistently not been like enjoying this person or getting anything out of this relationship for like 5, 6, 7 years. Like, what do I do? How do I get out of it? And now I'm noticing this stuff like 6 months in, like 2 months in, like second conversation. And so I think that's been really nice, just to be respectful of my time and of the other person's time, but also still wanting to be kind in communicating, like, hey, this isn't working, or hey, I really want this to work. How can we change it? How can we grow here? And just also evaluating like who's open to having those conversations and who's open to making the changes. And I also want to be really clear that it's not always me being like, hey, I know you're obsessed with me, but get out of my life. Like, it is 1,000%. I do not think that I am the world's greatest friend and everybody loves me and I never do anything wrong. And the only time that friendships end is when it's the other person's fault. Like, I absolutely take full responsibility, where a lot of the time it is me. Where I'm not the one that's like putting the effort in. So I did have a couple people reach out last week and ask, like, can you give a better illustration of the whole, whether the relationship is 50-50 or it's 90-10? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, when somebody's putting in more energy, what does that look like? So I'll tell you guys a quick story that I think illustrates this really well. Like, I have a friend who, when she and I met, I would say our relationship was 90-10, in which she was putting in 90% of the effort and I was putting in 10. And it's not because I didn't like her. It was because she's more outgoing than me. So she and I met at a NaNoWriMo event. It was during November, where, that's National Novel Writing Month, where the goal is that you write a first draft of a book in 1 month. And I had historically not gone to the events. I usually would just do the virtual ones because I don't like to leave my house and I don't like new people. And the events that I have gone to have a lot of older people, like nobody's my age, and I just wasn't finding like friends my age to hang out with that had the same interests that I wanted to do stuff with. So I was kind of just like, why am I going to drive 45 minutes to that library or coffee house or whatever to still just sit here with my headphones on? Like, that just kind of seems like a waste. But something about this particular event, I think it was closer to me, and I was like, you know what, I've got some time. Let me just go and be around other people that are also working on their novels and see what happens. I met this girl there, and we happened to be the same age. We didn't talk a whole lot at the event, but we talked enough to realize that like we were the same age. We had some similar interests, and we exchanged information, and we're like, hey, it would be cool to hang out sometime. Maybe we can write together sometime. So this could have been an example of like both people are willing to put in like not enough energy to match, which would be like you're both putting in less than 50% so that you can't meet in the middle, right? Because if you look at your line as like 100%, so you can either meet in the middle going 50-50, or you can meet not quite in the middle, but you can go 70-30, 60-40, whatever it is that equals 100. But if it doesn't equal 100, then you don't meet in the middle. And those relationships to me would be people that like you meet like this and you exchange info and you say like, hey, let's hang out sometime. But then you get home and they get home, and whether you get distracted and you just don't think about them ever again, or you just don't care enough and you're kind of just like, if they reach out to me, I'll go doing the thing. But if they don't, then we'll never speak to each other because I'm not going to reach out to them. If you both walk away with that mentality, then you kind of both went 5%, and then you just don't ever meet in the middle and you never see each other again, and it's not a big deal. This could have been that, because that's kind of how I was feeling. I was kind of feeling like I'm probably not going to reach out. Like, I don't know that we had enough of a connection for me to reach out, but if she reaches out, like, I'm totally interested in trying. And she did reach out and asked me to meet at some coffee place to like write together. And so we ended up meeting at the coffee place. We did not work on our books at all. We just talked the whole time for hours, and we had a lot in common. I thought she was really cool. I really, really liked her, and we really, really connected. And I was like, oh, this girl is awesome. Like, maybe she's an answered prayer. Like, finally a friend that lives in the same city as me. This is amazing. But at the same time, like, I was like, I don't know if we're both feeling this or if this is just me. And I was really nervous about like being overbearing, because as I've told you guys in the past, my relationships tend to be like either the person really likes me and I don't like them, or I really like them and they don't like me. Like, it's very rarely mutual. But she was very consistent, and she kept reaching out and kept planning things. And I think it was partially more effort on her end because she's more outgoing than me. And we had talked about that as well, where like she is very familiar with the city. She goes out a lot. She knows a lot of different places. I think she has a list of like coffee houses that she likes, and also places she hasn't been that she wants to try. and just different places in the city that she likes to write and eat and whatever. And I do not ever leave my house, so I am not familiar with any of these places. Like if somebody were to ask me to recommend them somewhere to go in this city, honestly, I could not. Like there's maybe 4 or 5 places that I like that I could tell them. So I think that was partially also why she was putting more effort in, because she had more of the information. But she also was very, very kind and attentive in terms of like, she heard me tell stories about how like I get really bad parking anxiety. There's certain parts of town that I don't like going to because parking is hard. And I felt like she really went out of her way we eventually decided to just meet every Sunday at the same time and like work on our books, or maybe it was once a month. I honestly don't even know if it was monthly or weekly, but we had a standing time to like meet and hang out and write together. And she would always pick the place. And if it was a place where parking was hard, she would always get there first, and she would call me to guide me to like, here's where you should park. And then like, I'm right here and we'll walk there together. And just having somebody in my life that was that attentive, that she built trust with me very, very quickly, because she really paid attention to like my needs, which was, I have to feel safe. I have to feel comfortable with being in a new part of town, like somewhere that I don't usually go. And she was very attentive to that. And so once I felt like safe and comfortable in the relationship and that trust was built, then I feel like I started putting more effort in, and then it became 50-50, where like she didn't have to plan the thing, like I would plan the thing, or she didn't have to reach out to start the conversation, like I would do it. And I feel like now we're in a place where it's pretty even of when we check on each other. So that really is what I mean when I'm talking about the like 90-10 or the 50-50. And again, I don't think that this is really a conversation that you have with people. Like, I don't think that you talk to the friend and you say, hey, I'm only willing to put 10% of effort into this, so you better put in 90 or it's not happening. Like, I think it would be very odd and off-putting to like outright say that to anyone. I think it's more just something to notice. Like, if you find yourself in the position of like, you're always reaching out, you're always doing the planning. Like if you don't reach out, then the relationship crumbles and it doesn't exist, because that person is never going to reach out to you. If you find yourself in that position, I think you just ask like, why, and also, am I bothered by this? Do I care? If I'm always reaching out and the other person is reaching back, and then we connect and we have a good time, and I've talked to them about their feelings and they're like, yeah, I love hanging out with you, you're great, whatever. Like, are they just not, am I type A and they're type B? Like, are they just not a planner? And so they really need me to do it? Or is it because they don't like me and they're just hanging out with me to be nice and they can't figure out how to let me down? Like, I just think that you use the whole percentage of the energy being given thing as a gauge, because in some of your relationships, you're going to be putting forth more of the energy, and some of your relationships, you're going to put less, and some are going to be an even mix. And I think it's just up to you to decide, like, in each relationship, are you okay with that? Like, do you need more from the other person? Do you want more? Do you need or want less? Do you need it to be 50-50? And then once you figure out, like, if you're not getting what you need, or if the other person is not getting what they need, are you willing to give more, or are you willing to give less? And then you just see, like, does it line up? Because if you're okay with going the 80 or the 90 and the relationship is working on both ends with you doing that, then great, keep doing it. If you're not okay with it and it's bothering you, or you're needing it to change over time, I think it's just something to notice. And on that note, I'm going to segue into today's topic, which is, why do we want what we want? Like, I have had so many people reach out lately of like, I want friends, or like even friends saying like, I want a spouse, like I'm ready to get married. And I always ask, like, why do you want to get married? Why do you want that friend? Why do you want a new job? And to a lot of people, it's like very irritating. If you've been in therapy for a while, you're used to it, because usually like your therapist is going to ask you why a lot to try to get to the root of like what the actual issue is. So I won't tell the whole story because I've gotten into it before, but basically, like, my whole teens and 20s, I was dead set on finding a husband. And I felt like I'm going to get old. I'm going to get too old to get married and have a baby because for some reason the cutoff was 25. Like, 25 was the absolute oldest that I could get married. And I was so sad. And my therapist was just constantly asking me, like, why do you need a husband? Like, why is being married a measure of success? And why is being single a measure of failure? Like, why do you feel like you've done something wrong or are being punished by God when you're single and you're being rewarded when you're in a relationship? Like, where does that come from? And it honestly took us years to work through this. And I eventually came to the conclusion that, like, I really just wanted a wedding. I didn't want a marriage. Thank God I came to that conclusion before I got married. And I just say this to say, I think that evaluating why you want something can really go a very long way in helping you get it. And I also think it's important to note that your reason for wanting something does not have to match anybody else's. So, like, for me personally, I believe that marriage is a calling, and I believe this within the Christian community. Like, outside of the Christian community, I think marriage is a different thing, and I don't really have much opinions on it. But I think for two Christians that want to be married, like, under the way that the Bible describes marriage, I believe that it is a calling in which God calls the man and the woman together to become one for the betterment of God's kingdom in some way. I think that it's sacrificial. I think that it is to mirror Christ's relationship with the church, which I honestly can't even totally explain because I haven't researched it or dug into it enough. But what I have learned about it, it's something that, like, I don't feel called to and I don't feel ready for, and it's not something that I want right now. I personally believe that, like, wanting to get married because I'm lonely or because I fell in love with somebody and I just want to be with this person that I love forever, I don't think either of those are good reasons to get married. I don't think that they're enough. But that's me. Like, if you want to get married because you fell in love and you want to love each other forever and that's like the driving force of your marriage and that's a good reason to you, that's great. If you are lonely and you want to get married so that there's somebody in the house with you all the time, that's also great. I would argue, like, can you get a roommate? Can you get a dog? Like, is a spouse the only thing that can curb the loneliness? I don't know that marriage gets rid of loneliness. And it's just one of those things that, again, your reason doesn't have to match mine. Like, I don't have to think that why you're getting married is a good reason. I don't know that your reason to get married even has to match your spouse's. I just think that you and the person that you're marrying, you both should have a reason that makes sense to you and that makes sense to the person that you're marrying, even if they're different. Even, like, going back to friendship, like, I've spent a lot of time asking myself, like, why am I so desperate to have a group of girlfriends in my city that I get together with, like, every Friday night? And I think part of it is nostalgia because I had that in high school and I really loved it. Like, I loved knowing what I was doing every Friday night for the foreseeable future. I was like, I'm going to be at a football game, or I'm going to be at one of these girls' houses, or they're going to be at mine, and we're going to watch movies and eat popcorn and pizza, and it's going to be fun. And I loved them. Like, I loved these girls. I loved their families, and that was fun to me. Like, I always looked forward to Fridays because I had a slumber party, like, every Friday for almost 3 straight years. And that's something that I miss and that I really would like to have back in my life. So I also kind of dig into, is there another way that could look, you know? Like, why am I discounting my friendships with people that don't live here, you know? Because there's most of my friends don't live anywhere close to me. And I typically end up relationally closer to my friends that live further away because we have to do more work to keep the relationship going, where we've either got to fly to see each other or we've got to make time to talk on the phone because we can't join like the local book club together, and we can't go to happy hour, and we can't do the Friday night slumber party or whatever. So it's like we really have to like both intentionally make that time for each other. And that's part of what I found in the past few years of like trying to work harder to find local friends. Is just for me personally, I have found that like getting friends locally has resulted in more like work friends or gym friends, you know, those friends that like you meet them at work, but then once somebody leaves the job, you're no longer friends. Like the thing that sustains your friendship is that thing that you have in common. And those friendships aren't bad. Like there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that I prefer deeper friendships. Like I don't want just a work friend where the friendship doesn't survive without the job. But I also think that those work friends are necessary to get you through the day-to-day at the job. But I was getting really sad that I couldn't find this like group of girlfriends. So I was trying to get to the root of like, okay, I know that I want this because I had it in high school. But I also want this because I keep seeing it on TV. Like I keep seeing TV shows and reading books about a group of 4 girlfriends that are besties, and they travel together and they go to happy hour together and they're just best friends. And then I started to be like, you know, is it realistic that I would have this thing that I had in high school as an adult? Honestly, no, because in high school, your world is so small. You're seeing the same people every single day for 4 years. So clearly, like, that's going to be very different in your adult life when your world is now so much bigger. Is it realistic that I would have this thing that I keep seeing on TV? Or is it more likely that writers keep writing this dynamic into movies and TV shows because it's what people want? And a lot of us watch TV and movies and we read books to escape our lives and to experience like a dream or something that we would love to have or love to see, you know, and it's kind of like, okay, maybe it's more realistic that I wouldn't have this in my life. And can I just watch the TV show and love it for what it is without feeling like I need what I'm seeing played out on this show in my real life to be happy? And if I can't do that, maybe I should just stop watching the show. But also, what is it that I am so nostalgic for about the group from high school? Is it the predictability of what I'm going to do every Friday night and who I'm going to be with? I don't think that's it. I think it was the relationships. I think it was that these girls were my best friends and I thought that we were all going to be best friends forever and be in each other's weddings. And I loved the idea that I was never going to have to like meet and get to know anybody else because I just had my like core group forever. And so that I think is really the root of the desire for me. It's that I want those deep relationships and I want it in a group where we all have that like deep relationship with each other so that the 4 of us can like go on trips together and do whatever it is. It's just a set, like we have our group chat and that's what's working. But then I think back to like, is that even what it was in high school? And like the answer is no, because between the 4 of us, like I was closer with one of the girls than I was with the other 2. And we each had that dynamic where there was somebody in the group that we were closer with, somebody in the group that we were less close with, and somebody in the group that we were probably only hanging out with because we were both just in the group. So then I think about like, okay, I maybe have just like idealized this dynamic and the way that I'm remembering it isn't even how it actually was. So is it even what I actually want to be pursuing today? Or do I want to pursue something different? We could even examine this in a work context. Like if you're unhappy at work and you're applying for new jobs, what is it that you dislike about your job that you're looking to change in your next one? You know, like usually for me, I almost always leave a job because I don't like my manager. Or I think my manager's not a good manager, whatever it is, but it's like do you really get to know? Sometimes you'll be interviewed by the person that's going to be your manager. Sometimes you'll meet them in the interview process, but it's like you don't really know what kind of manager they're going to be until you're working with them and they're managing you. And what I have found is that at every job, you can find a work bestie, and at every job, there's going to be a difficult person of some kind that you have to interact with. So I'm like, if I'm constantly trying to find new jobs because I'm trying to find better people, like I'll just be doing that forever. So is this an instance where maybe I need to just stay where I am and just find ways to work with the people that are around me in different and new ways? Or maybe I'm looking for a new job because I want to make more money. And so then it's like, okay, what's the amount of money? Like, is there a number that you can make that's going to make you happy forever? Or are you just perpetually going to be looking for new jobs to always be getting new money? And then is that actually making you happy? But maybe happiness isn't what you're after. Like maybe money is just what you're after, and that's your reason. And like, that's all good. Maybe you're looking for a specific kind of work. Whatever the reason is, I think identifying the reason will help you in the process, in the job hunt process, because when it comes to, it takes a lot of time to apply for jobs, like especially if you're doing the work of tailoring your resume to every individual job posting and writing a cover letter for every individual job posting. Like if you're really going to spend the time to do that, then wouldn't it make sense to make sure that you're spending the time on the ones that are actually getting you closer to your goals, right? Like if you are looking to change jobs because of the company culture and the people at your current job, that's going to tailor the types of questions that you ask in the interview. Whereas maybe if it's just about money, then you don't care about the culture. You don't care if it's work from home or hybrid or on-site, or you just care about the offer and the number in it. So, and then it's going to be like, well, maybe if that's the goal, then you're only looking at the salary and you're just throwing spaghetti at a wall, applying to everything that you can apply for. And I just think that it all comes back to your reason for applying will help you point yourself in a specific direction, as opposed to just like randomly flailing and wondering like why you can't figure it out. And I think this makes sense in like really anything that you're pursuing. Like my therapist asked me in our last session, like, why am I writing this book? Why do I want to write a book? And I was like, I don't know. I guess like I wrote the first draft of my first book when I was 10, because I was really into Totally Spies and I really like to read. And Mission Impossible 2 was my favorite movie. And I was just like, I just thought that I could do it. I won awards in school a lot for like creative writing contests. Like writing was just an early skill that I just had been good at. And I just thought, oh, it would be cool to be an author one day. But then I kind of like, I just kept putting it down and I kept putting it aside because I'm like, I already know the story. Like I know the characters and I know the story. And I kept going back and forth between like, I would love to publish it, but I also am kind of okay if I don't. Like maybe I just want like a completed bound copy to hold in my hands and read one day, because I actually really do enjoy my own book. Like I think it's funny. There are moments that make me cry. There are moments that I'm really invested in. Like I'm really invested in my own characters that I've created, and I'm like, so I don't really need anyone else to like feel the way about it that I do. So maybe I don't need to publish it. And so my therapist was asking like, well, let's dig into that. Like what would be enough? You said that like you've got your sisters reading it, some of your friends are reading it, and they're giving you feedback and they all seem to like it. Is that enough that they like it? Is it enough that you just finish the book for your one friend who really loves the book and is really invested in all the characters? Or is it enough to get it published and then have strangers like it too? Like, are you looking for, what is it? Are you looking for recognition from strangers that you're, or really anyone? Are you looking for recognition that you're a good writer? Are you looking for fame and fortune? Are you actually attempting to become a full-time author? Or is this just like something that you're doing for fun? Like you enjoy writing it, and like, is that enough? And to be perfectly honest with you, this is like the first time she's asked me this, was just in our most recent session. So I don't actually have answers to her questions yet. We worked on my whole obsessed with getting married situation for like 2 years. So I don't expect to have an answer on this one quickly, but it's interesting to me because I have been wondering, like, why do I keep deprioritizing my book? Like every time I sit down and I tell myself like I'm going to spend the next hour writing, if somebody calls me in the next 5 minutes, I will answer the phone and spend 45 minutes on the phone. And I'm like, well, there went my writing time. Or if I get a task in for work, like I'll do that instead. Or I will work on some volunteer stuff for my church. Or like I always find ways to, like, the time that I set aside to work on my book, I do something else. And I'm not fully sure why I do that. Like, am I afraid of failing? Am I afraid that all I'm going to do is finish it and spend years and years trying to get it published and then it's terrible and nobody will ever publish it? Am I afraid of success? Like, I might be afraid that I do get it published and then I do have to be an author, because I've already like gotten a taste from this podcast of like, you put your thoughts out there and people have opinions on them. So, and it's just like, I always wondered whenever I would see celebrities tweeting about like, hey, what do you guys think of my new song? I'm like, why do you bother asking? Because you don't want anyone to say we don't like it. So you may as well just be like, you guys are loving my new song, right? And everyone's going to just like your post because they're obsessed with you and they don't really care if they like the song or not. But that's the thing that artists have to deal with. It's like you put your art out there and you get, people are going to like it and people are not going to like it. You're going to have to deal with criticism. And I have read so many books this year that I have not liked. And every single time I write a Goodreads review, I think, what if this is the review that somebody wrote about my book? And I try so hard to make them so nice, just in case any of the authors ever see them. Because I don't want to be mean and I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm just like, well, even if I hated the book, it's like, that doesn't mean everyone will hate it. Like, somebody will like it. And I would hope that nobody hates my book or my podcast so much that they're out here telling people like, like advocating against it. Like when I don't like things, like if I don't like a podcast, I just stop listening to it. If I don't like a book, I stop reading it. And that's what I put in my Goodreads review. I say like, did not finish it 39%. So here's what I thought of the first 39%. Didn't read anything past that, so I can't have an opinion on it. But it's one of those things where I think I really need to figure out the root behind like, why am I writing this book? I think that's what keeps getting me stuck. Like, I think I need to answer that question before I'm going to be able to actually sit down and like fully finish the series. So that is the exercise that I am going to encourage you all to try in the next week or month or even the rest of this year, is just that when there's something that you're trying to go after, like first ask yourself, why do you want it? And then evaluate, is that a good enough reason for you for wanting the thing? And if it is, then great, pursue the thing. If it's not, then I think reevaluate. So, when it comes to like, when I realized that like I really wanted a wedding, but I wasn't really thinking about past the wedding, like I just wanted to put on the dress and wear a tiara and walk down the aisle and be center of attention for a day. Like, do I have to get married to do that? Or can I just throw a giant party? Like, I could throw like my 40th birthday party and I can invite all my friends and buy them all dinner and have an open bar and walk down an aisle and wear a tiara and a fancy dress. Like, if that's truly what I want, is there another way to get it? And it's the same kind of thing where with maybe I don't have like the friends in my town to do like a group of 4 girls hanging out every Friday, but do I have 4 friends that I could pull together virtually on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or whatever it is to do something? Like, is there a way that I can create the thing that I want that just looks different than how I wanted it to or how I originally envisioned it. Just some food for thought there. Let me know what you guys think. Moving into the hard conversation of the week. The hard conversation this week was ending a friendship before it even got started. And I wouldn't say that the conversation was the hard part. It was more like understanding that having the conversation was necessary, I guess, or like evaluating how I felt about it and how the other person felt about it. It was a situation where like I felt like this person had really pursued me and I felt like they wanted like more than friendship but wouldn't come out and say that. And we did have a few conversations where they had told me like, oh, well, I think like men and women should always start as friends and let it grow to something else later. And I was like, okay, I disagree with that. Like I would prefer, I'm either dating you or I'm not. And I'm not friends with you for 5 years. And then one day I wake up and I have a crush on you. Like I either had a crush on you in the beginning and I already talked to you about it. And if you're my friend and I fall in love with you, I'm probably not able to stay friends with you. If you're my friend and I'm not in love with you, then I am able to stay friends with you, but I'm not like waking up one day in love with you. Like I know when I meet you, like if the chemistry is there, if I want it more. So like I'd rather just be upfront. And so I tried to ask a few times, like, I kind of feel like you're trying to be more than friends here. Like, is that true? And I could never get a direct answer. Like, I wasn't getting yes or no. The response was always like, oh, I think you're overthinking it. Like, let's just see where it goes. And it just was making me uncomfortable. Like, for me personally, if I say to you, I am not interested in more than friendship here. Like your options are that we don't speak at all, we remain acquaintances, or we become friends, but that's it. Like there is nothing beyond friendship. The only acceptable answer to that, to me personally, is okay, I respect that. Let's continue on as friends, and I will never try to make it more, and I will not say or do anything that's crossing that line. Or it's respectfully, let's not be friends because I want to be more than that. And I can't see pursuing a friendship with you without keeping the door open or trying to open the door to it becoming more so that I could be like, all right, cool. You can't handle it. Great. Let's not be friends. So the fact that I didn't get either of those was just very off-putting to me. And I'm not even saying that like the person was wrong or right or specifically did anything wrong. I did like screenshot our conversation and sent it to a whole bunch of friends. So part of it is like, I've told you guys before, when I crowdsource opinions like that, it's usually not because I don't know what to do. It's usually because I want to solidify a decision that I've already made. So I look at it like flipping a coin. Like if you are trying to pick between two things and you're like, oh, I have absolutely no idea if I want to take job A or job B, if I want to live in California or New York, like I could totally go either way, flip a coin, because the idea is that once the coin is in the air, you are wishing for heads or tails. And then you know by which one you're wishing for, what it is that you want. So that's kind of what I do when I crowdsource opinions to my friends, is like I ask them all the same question just to evaluate how I feel about their responses, because it either solidifies what I had already decided and what I was feeling, or it does the opposite. So I pretty much had already decided that like I didn't want to be friends with this person. And I was kind of looking at it like, all of the interactions that we've had have been like, you've reached out to have a specific conversation about a specific thing. And like, I agreed to have a conversation about that thing, or I agreed to have a conversation about this thing. And the same way as like, you can revoke consent at literally any time, right? Like agreeing to go on a date with somebody is not the same as agreeing to have sex with somebody. Agreeing to go back home with somebody after the date is still not the same as agreeing to have sex with them. And even if it is, you can decide you no longer want to have sex with them in the middle of having sex with them. And they should respect that. Like you can revoke at any time. So I was sitting there like, some of my friends had said like, yo, this guy is giving creepy stalker vibes. Like you need to run. This is really scary. And I was like, I'm not feeling like it's that dramatic at all. Like I kind of was just feeling like I think this person is perfectly nice. I think we just aren't compatible. Like, I think we're just not compatible friends. Like, after I have conversations, I'm just not feeling myself wanting more of it. And when they reach out to talk about something, I'm like, sure, I don't mind talking about that. And then I had a friend that was like, well, you did spend this time on the phone with them and you do reach back when they reach out. So even though they're doing all of the reaching, you're still reaching back and like having conversations. And so you're sending mixed messages and being confusing. And it really, really bothered me when my friend said that to me, because I was like, you know what? No, actually, like if somebody asks, can I call you and talk about your book? Like, I have feedback for you. I'm like, sure, I'm happy to talk about that. Consenting to that conversation is not consenting to anything else. Like, consenting to have a conversation is not consenting to a friendship. And there was no point that I ever told this person that I wanted to be friends or that I wanted to talk on a regular basis. And so I was struggling and going back and forth of like, am I sending mixed messages? Am I being confusing? Because I really, really try to always go out of my way to be abundantly clear. But I think that the reality of the situation is that you can be as clear as you possibly can, but you have no control over how the other person is receiving it. Like, everybody that's listening to this right now is having different thoughts about it and forming different opinions. You're all filling in how long we've known each other and how long we've been talking, and like all of these details that I did not give you in the last 5 minutes that I've been talking about this. You're filling them in with your own brain, and you're all coming to different conclusions. And I have no control over that. Like, I can't control over what you guys think or what you do with what you hear. So I think that was part of my issue, as I was trying to control that, where I was trying to make sure that I was communicating what I felt and what I heard and received to the best of my ability, assuming that that's how they were being received on the other end. And I think that this other person was doing that as well, where it's like he had an idea of what he wanted and what he was looking for and how he was communicating and what he was doing, and thought that it was being received really well on my end. And I just feel like sometimes it's like you just met someone and you don't click right away. And sometimes you can like massage it out and you can figure out like better ways to communicate. But just for me personally, like, I'm not interested in doing the massaging really, really early in a relationship. Like, I feel like after we have had the honeymoon stage, and I mean this, I'm not talking about the honeymoon stage like in a romantic relationship, but I mean like a new friend. Like, you know, you met somebody at work and you guys hit it off and you went to happy hour and that was fun, and so you decided to go to a winery for a day and that's fun, and then you decide to take a trip together and that's fun. And it's like, after you've had the initial period of like enjoying each other, then at some point you're gonna have a disagreement, but you now have the rapport with one another to work through the disagreement. Whereas if the disagreement happens on the very early end and it's super early on that you're just missing each other and constantly having to explain yourself, that to me is just a red flag where I'm like, we're not compatible here. Like, this isn't a relationship that I want to pursue, because that's not the kind of work that I want to do on the front end. And I don't think that that's anyone's fault. Like, I still, even though I had some friends that were like, oh my gosh, like these texts are super creepy and aggressive, I was like, I'm not getting like creepy and aggressive. I'm just getting not listening to me. And just like not hearing what I'm saying. And I also think that I'm not hearing what he's saying. And at the end of the day, like, I think we're just not compatible friends. And I think that's okay. Like, I don't think that it has to be anyone's fault or that it has to be a problem. But I do think it's difficult of like when you're trying to be nice and you're trying to be kind. Like, one of my friends said, like, you can be nice to a fault. Like, you can work so hard at not wanting to hurt someone's feelings that you end up just hurting yourself, because it's like now you're frustrated that you keep having these conversations you don't want to have, and you keep having these interactions that make you feel uncomfortable, but you've been allowing them to go on for too long because you weren't upfront to just say, hey, I don't want to be friends with you. And it was interesting because then me and this friend had an interesting conversation of like, is it rude? Is it mean to say to somebody, I don't want to be your friend? And when we started the conversation, I was like, yeah, I think that's rude. And she was like, oh, I don't think it's rude. I think it's nice to say you don't want to be friends. Because then she's like, wouldn't you rather somebody tell you that they don't want to be your friend? Like, yeah, it's probably going to hurt your feelings, but wouldn't you rather them be honest with you and say that, as opposed to pretend that they want to be your friend? Like, then that's mean. And I was like, well, I was never pretending that I wanted to be anyone's friend. I think it's more that, this happens to me at work sometimes, where like for me in a work setting, I'm really not caring about anyone's personal life. Like, I am not a girl that likes to shoot the shit at the beginning and the end of a meeting. I am like, I don't want you investigating my background and asking me how my weekend was and being like, oh, that's a different wall today. Are you not home? Are you in a different room? Like, I don't want to have those conversations. Like, I just want to talk about work and get the project done and get out. And if we can do that in 10 minutes, then let's make the 30-minute meeting 10 minutes and not spend 10 minutes going around the room of like, what did everyone do this weekend? But other people love that. Like, other people, that makes them feel like the office is a community and they're learning something about each other and they're growing and they're having a good time. And to me, I am just like, I don't want to do that. My boss is one of those people who loves that. Like, he really wants our workplace to be like more than just work. Like, he wants to really show that he cares about people and listens to them. And so it's very important to him to spend the first 5 minutes of a meeting asking people about their weekends and how their kids are doing and like that kind of stuff. So I do think like that's something that he and I just butt heads on and we just don't have in common. So at the end of the day, it's like when he asks how my weekend is, I usually just say good or fine, how was yours? And I try to focus on him. And if he's like, oh, it was good, what did you do? I'm like, not much. Like, I don't give a whole lot of details because I'm just not interested in sharing details of my weekend with my boss. But I also don't think that he would be receptive to me saying like, hey man, I don't want to be friends with you. Like, you're my boss. I only want to talk to you about work. Like, let's just focus on work. Because he's been very clear of like why he asks these questions and what he's trying to do, which like, I do think that the sentiment is sweet. I like his goal. I'm just not interested in being his friend or like sharing these details with each other. So it's one of those things where I don't think that it's rude to tell people that you don't want to be friends with them. I think what's nice or rude is the intent behind it. Like, are you saying this to hurt this person's feelings? Are you saying it rudely? Or are you saying it to save them time and to save you time and to just move on from the thing? Granted, at the end of the day, like, I have to regularly meet with my boss. Like, I don't have choices around that, but I do have choices in like other areas of my life. And I think there are people at work that like do start to reach out outside of a work setting and just share too much about their lives. And some of those people, it doesn't bother you and you end up being friends with. Other of those people, you're like, I don't care. Like, don't share this with me, And it's not always going to match up. Like, two very different people can do the same action. And from one of them, it's going to be really creepy. And from one of them, it's going to be sweet. Like, if you think about like tucking a stray hair behind your ear, like if a family member or your best friend or your significant other does that, it's sweet. But if a stranger or a kidnapper or somebody who's just not close with you does that, it's really freaking creepy. Even the friend that was like, well, you did spend like a couple hours on the phone with this person. It's like, I can see we're getting mixed messages. And I was like, I think that people need to understand like what it is and be very clear about it, because I have spent some like 9 hours on the phone with somebody before. And I was very like, oh my gosh, you called me before the sun even went down. And then the sun came up the next day and we were still on the phone. You love me. And this person was very like, absolutely no, like that's not what that means at all. Like, sorry, but no. And it was very like, I usually feel like if I like someone, especially if I'm in love with somebody, I am very like, I love you enough for the both of us. Like, if you like me even 1/100th of the amount that I love you, that is enough. Like, like you can't possibly not love me back because I love you so much. And you know what? That's totally irrational. And like, honestly, this dude was totally right. He's like, just because I spent an absurd amount of time on the phone with you, that in itself has no reflection on how I feel about you. So like, that's just not even, your brain is doing this. And like, I'm sorry that I gave you that impression, but also you have to sit back and be like, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 here, which I think is the same thing. I think that you can't necessarily say like, because I have talked to this person X amount of times, or because I see this person X often, that automatically equals we are best friends. But again, like, there are people that you feel closer to than they feel you are, and there are people where they feel closer to you than you feel you are. And when it's uneven like that, if you're both okay with it and you both acknowledge it, then it's fine. But I think the time to have a conversation is when it's very, very clear to you that it's uneven and that your desires are misaligned as well. Okay, movie and TV recs of the week. So I watched Madam Web over the weekend and went into it thinking like, oh, this can't possibly be as bad as everyone says. It was worse. So I highly recommend not watching that movie. But hey, if you love really lame superhero movies with terrible writing and terrible acting and just terrible everything all around, maybe it will be a very good time. I highly recommend everybody. Actually, I shouldn't say I highly recommend everybody. I also binge watched the entirety of the OA over the weekend. You have to go into it knowing that all your questions will not be answered because it was supposed to have 5 seasons and it got canceled after 2. Personally, I thought it was really good. If you Google it, you will see some reviews online that tell you that the OA is about the power of dance, which personally, I think that the people that wrote those reviews didn't get it. But it's the most batshit show I've ever seen in my life in the best way. Like, I think the writing is amazing, the acting is amazing, the story is really interesting. Like, I just could not look away, and I thought it was really, really good. And I actually was totally fine with the way that season 2 ends. Like, I think season 2 answers every question that I had in season 1. And then the end of season 2, like the very, very like finale, shows you like where they were going with season 3, which I think also would have been really interesting. But I also was like, this show was so crazy that I'm kind of glad that there's not more of it to see. And then the last thing, that this is kind of a down the middle. So I have like something I hated, something I loved, and then straight in the middle, Wild Cards on the CW. So in full transparency, I only watched this show because Giacomo Giannotti, who plays my sweet, sweet Dr. DeLuca on Grace, is starring in this show. And I was so, so upset with him not being on Grace anymore. I was so excited to see he has a new show. It's a classic CW show, so I'm not even gonna say that it's bad. I don't think it's bad. I mean, it's what you expect from a CW show, right? Like, the stars are hot, the plot is not particularly deep, it's a cute premise, like, it's like, cop gets paired with a con artist and they're gonna fall in love while they're working all these jobs together. Like, it's cute. It's classic CW. So if you like CW shows, you'll like it. If you don't, you'll hate it. But it has been renewed for season 2, so it's gonna continue. Okay, bye.
I'm not here to sugarcoat, love's already above you. Too much shelter causes pain, let's just be real honest. Things are gonna knock you down, avoidance will not help you out. Let's talk it through, you, me, and you. Let's keep it real honest.